Good afternoon, everyone. I don't know how you're feeling. It's Saturday early afternoon. I'm feeling pretty tired myself, so I'm sure you guys who've had a week full of chock-a-block exams are feeling pretty worse for wear, more so than me. But anyway, I thought first off today I would look at paper 3 and in particular look at section B. You can see there from the heading that the section B question is worth 10 marks. You have to do 2 of them. So remember on paper 3, it is compulsory to do both complete questions, and each of those questions has a section B worth 10 marks. You can see the allocation of time that I would dedicate to the question, probably somewhere between 20 to 25 minutes, which gives you about 30 minutes for section A. So remember, this paper is an hour and 45 minutes. So each question, complete question, 52.5 minutes. So the 2 section Bs, I would allocate 20 to 25 minutes. As I've said in class before, do the maths. 20 marks out of 60 dedicated to the 2 section B questions. And remember, those 60 marks are worth 30% of your final grade. So that means each section B question is actually worth 5% towards your grade. And obviously adding up the 2, you get 10% of your final grade. The great thing is these are very easy questions to do, especially if you follow our template or formula. You should get anywhere between 7 to 10 out of 10, which means overall you should pick up 7 to 10% towards your final grade. So, follow this template. If you do, I expect you to smash the section Bs out of the ground, and again, that sets you up very well for a good grade overall. With respect to section B, we call it the cosmic law of one, or the universal law of one. It's a very simple procedure to follow, quite formulaic, and if you stick to this, you will do pretty well. You can see there that the first point I've stipulated is that when you do the introduction, and I get this from Mr. Scudder too, because Mr. Scudder's marked a lot of paper 3s for the IB, so what we're telling you is pretty gospel. In your opening, in the introduction towards this recommend question, outline the economic issue being canvassed in the case study, and then recommend a single policy. There is absolutely no reason to discuss more than one policy, just stick to one, okay? I would strongly urge you to use the word recommend in the opening of your response in terms of the introduction. A lot of you on the mocks, a lot of you in previous term exams didn't use the word recommend when we told you you should. Again, take a deep breath and use the word recommend in the opening. Okay, second bit. Once you've kind of outline the issue and recommended policy, then the next step is to explain the policy thoroughly, and in particular, you should explain how it works to alleviate the issue that's presented in the case study. And of course, as you go along, you should use any text and data that's in section A to support your explanation. Now, we always say explain it fully, and in a way what you do is you try to pretend that there is a diagram there, but you don't actually use one. So there is no requirement for you to use the diagram in the recommend question, so I would not waste my time sketching it. But your explanation should try to explain the policy as if there was a diagram there, okay? And that simply means you could be talking about how the policy might shift demand or supply curves, or marginal social cost or marginal social benefit, marginal private cost, depending upon what it is. It could be cost curves. Increasingly so, we're seeing questions around macro on paper 3. So, it could be just talking about ADAS curves. And obviously when those curves shift around, then you need to explain what happened in terms of prices, quantities, costs, output, price levels, etc. Okay, so you're explaining stuff as if there was a diagram there, but you don't actually have a diagram there. Just to unpack that a little bit more, so, let's say that there's some kind of positive externality happening in the case study and you want to encourage uh, the market to produce more. What you could talk about there is introducing a subsidy. And of course, we know what a subsidy do. It's a cash payment made to producers, so that's what you would say. As a result, that leads to an increase in supply, shifting it down to the right, and as a result, that will lead to lower prices and greater output. So, as I said, explaining stuff there as if there is a diagram there, but you're not showing it. Now, steps 3 and 4 is where we get to this notion of, the cosmic law of one or the universal law of one. Once you've completed your explanation of how the policy should work, then the next step is to explain one strength of a policy and then use text or data from section A to support your explanation. Okay, so just explain one strength of the policy, and typically you would pick the high priority one, the one which you think has the greatest impact or the greatest effect. That's the one I would talk about, and that's enough there. Step 4, just explain one weakness or limitation of a policy, and again, formulate whatever text and data is there to support your counterclaim or your explanation. In this case, I would do. To give you an example, if you're suggesting a tax to maybe correct a negative externality, you may have done a calculation in section A, which may indicate that the demand for the product might be inelastic. So obviously your limitation there would be that the tax may not be so effective because the demand for the product is inelastic, and so you're not going to get a significant change in the consumption or production of the product that you're dealing with. So, that's a good thing to do. And then finally, finish off the response, basically conclude why you recommend the policy. And again, it's essential that you use the word recommend in your conclusion too. So your response should be bookended at the start and at the finish with the word recommend. And, that would be fantastic if you do that. Now, just some other advice there. The IB only gives you one page, so that is all that is needed for you to complete the response. I wouldn't go beyond that one page. If they're only providing one page, then they think that's adequate enough for you to score 10 out of 10. So keep it simple, stick to the one page. Whatever you do, do not write in the margins because the scanners might not pick that up. So if you do need to go beyond one page because you've got big handwriting or whatever, ask for more paper. But even on that second page, I wouldn't go too much beyond, maybe a paragraph more. There really is no need. I mean, I have looked at many EURs over the last few years, and there have been students getting 10 out of 10 for just simply writing one page. Okay, the other point there, just again, make sure you use text and data throughout your response, and that would include a blend of both qualitative statements from the text in section A or any numbers that are obviously available in the information, or any numbers that you've calculated as part of your section A that you can use. So, when you start the exam, quickly look at section B, look at the question, and then as you're going along working on Part A, have a think about what aspects of your responses could be used in conjunction in Section B. So, again, highlight, annotate, plan. I mean, you don't necessarily have to plan the Section B response, but I would certainly be highlighting and annotating and making a note to yourself, how could I use this particular piece of information to assist your response in Section B. Again, really important that you signpost as you work your way through the response. So, especially when you're getting to evaluating the policy, just a simple start of the sentence where you just say, the main strength of this policy is blah, blah, blah. And then when you're looking at the limitation or weakness of the policy, you would phrase it in a very similar way. So, the main weakness or the most significant weakness of introducing this policy is the following. Okay, so make it signpost very clearly to the examiner. And again, like I keep saying, just make their life pretty easy so they don't have to think about it too hard giving you a good mark. Okay, so again, use the word recommend in the intro and the conclusion. That would be amazing. And then finally, where are the case studies for the questions coming from? You can see there they can cover the entire syllabus, micro, macro, international and development. Typically what we're seeing, I think, in the first question is micro, and in particular we're looking at market failure. And there seems to be, just scanning through the previous exams, the micro question does seem to be about externalities. So, I would obviously know, again, the, try to understand negative and positive externalities, both in consumption and production. In particular, the policies, the general policies used to correct externalities. So you're looking at taxes and subsidies, regulations, laws, information campaigns, tradable permits, just that list that comes straight from the subject guide, which I'll show you later, probably in a later video, but they're the kind of things. Macro seems to be sneaking in there. So if you look at the May paper, one of the questions was on the deflating economy in Japan, and the recommend policy there is actually trying to inflate the economy through expansionary monetary or fiscal policy. So again, macro seems to be sneaking into the case study there, and that could possibly be your recommend question. And then finally, when you look at the global unit, it could be international, it could be development. So again, think about exchange rates, think about trade, protectionism, etc. Balance of payments issues. So it could be, persistent current account deficit. What are one or two things that you can do, or one thing you can do to arrest a persistent current account deficit? And development, honestly, it's always about barriers to growth and development, and then you would look at the policies around rectifying those barriers or overcoming those barriers. So it's pretty simple, formulaic. It doesn't need the specific detail that you would in paper one, but it can be a little bit more theoretical. But having said that, you would obviously use the text and data from section A to support your response. Just very quickly, I'll show you the paper that you guys did in year 11. I think you did this in term 3. I'm a bit loath to show some actual exams from the IB because, I don't want them suing my ass off because I had the temerity of, using their exam papers to educate people. So I just thought I'd stick to one of the ones that we created and you've sat before. So that was the one with the, the salmon farming and, what the recommended policy would be that the Tasmanian state government could use. We were looking for obviously an introduction of a tax or a levy. You could have talked about direct regulations or the law being changed to kind of curtail salmon farming or just an information campaign. Any of those kind of policy solutions would be ideal. You can see there you've only got to tap out a page, so there's not too much to write. I know when I created this test, I deliberately added this information. Now, I mean, the IB won't have paragraphs as such, but they will have bullet points that you can use. And you can see what I've done there. I've actually highlighted things, statements or numbers that could be used to include in your Part B response. Okay, so that's all I would be doing. You scan through the paper. Is there any information or any calculations that I undertook which could be used to add to support your claim and counterclaim in the recommend paper, and, job done. So don't stress. It's easy. Follow the recipe, follow the formula that we've given to you. We've told you a few times in class now. Universal law of one. At the start, describe the issue, recommend a policy, just a singular policy. Tell us how it should work, so explain it thoroughly how it should work as if there was a diagram there, but there isn't one. Follow it through with one of the strengths of the policy, then one of the weaknesses of a policy, supporting the claim and counterclaim with evidence from the case study, and then in the conclusion, you know, just quickly sum up and just quickly state why you recommend that policy, and obviously use the word recommend again in the conclusion. Don't write in the margins. If you need to go beyond one page, don't go too much onto the second page. You can really score 10 out of 10 just by writing one page. Okay, I'll finish up there. That ends my quick advice there for paper 3, section B. Speak to you soon.